The Two Kingdoms, A Night of Thebes and the Birth of Destiny. The night air is soft over Thebes, warm and perfumed with lotus and incense. You stand at the edge of the Nile, where silver light ripples across the water, and the desert breathes its ancient hush. The world is old, older than memory, and yet something new is stirring in the heart of Egypt. It is around the year 1508 BCE, the dawn of the New Kingdom, and Egypt has risen again from chaos into glory. The time of the foreign Hyksos invaders is over. Once more the two lands are united beneath a single crown, and Thebes, called Wasit by its people, glows like a jewel of divine order. On the eastern bank, the city of the living hums, with life shipbuilders carving cedar from Lebanon, priests tending sacred fires, scribes pressing wet clay with stories meant to last forever. The temples of Karnak and Luxor rise skyward in slow, patient grandeur, their columns alive with color and prayer. Across the river, the western bank lies in tranquil shadow, the city of the dead, where tombs pierce the cliffs like the ribs of eternity. In the fading light, you can almost hear the chisels of the stonecutters echoing across the valley, preparing homes for kings in the afterlife. And at the center of this vast living theater stands the ruler of the two lands, Pharaoh Thutmose III. He is a man of power and confidence, the kind of king who carries both sword and scepter with equal ease. Under his reign, Egypt has pushed farther than ever before, south into the gold-rich lands of Nubia and north into the bustling cities of Syria. His armies march beneath banners embroidered with the falcon of Horus, their chariots glinting beneath the sun. When Thutmose returns from battle, the crowds roar, and the air fills with the shimmer of golden dust and the beat of drums. He is more than a man, he is the living God on earth, the keeper of the divine balance of order and justice. But inside the palace walls, away from the drums and the cheers, another story begins, one not of war, but of birth and destiny. Thutmose's great royal wife. Queen Ahmose moves through corridors lit by flickering torches. Her blood is pure, the living link to Egypt's founding dynasties. That night, beneath a sky glittering with stars, the priests will later read, as omens she gives birth to a daughter. The child is named Hatshepsut, foremost of noble ladies, a daughter. In another empire it might have been cause for disappointment. But in Egypt the balance of power runs through both mother and father. Royal blood flows strongest through the female line, and this girl, though small and silent, carries the sacred lifeblood of kings. The priests murmur prayers of thanks to Amun, the great god of Thebes, whose unseen hand shapes the fate of rulers and realms. You can almost imagine the scene, the soft cry of the newborn, the careful whispers of attendants, the pharaoh gazing down at the child who will one day challenge everything Egypt believes about kingship. For now she is only a princess, but even as an infant she represents something powerful, the continuation of divine order, the harmony of Marduk made flesh. Years pass. The girl grows among marble halls and open courtyards perfumed with lilies. She watches her father preside over festivals, learns the solemn rituals of Amun, and listens to priests chanting the hymns of creation. Tutors teach her to read the sacred hieroglyphs, to count the offerings that fill the temple granaries, to calculate the yield of grain from the flooded Nile. While other children play in the gardens, Hatshepsut studies the art of rule. She watches, she learns, and behind her young, calm eyes, something fierce begins to take shape, an understanding that the power of the pharaoh is not born of muscle or sword, but of intellect, ritual, and will. But dynasties like the Nile twist and change. Thutmose's son, Thutmose, dies young, and another son, Thutmose III, born to a lesser queen named Mutnofret, becomes the heir. He has royal blood, yes, but not as pure as Hatshepsut's, and so the royal court begins to murmur quietly, carefully, perhaps the girl with the sacred mother will yet be the key to legitimacy. The solution in the eyes of the priests and the state is clear. Hatshepsut will marry her half-brother Thutmose II, joining the purest blood of Egypt to the next in line for the throne. It is not a marriage of passion, but of destiny, a union meant to preserve divine order. Hatshepsut accepts her role as great royal wife, the highest title a woman can hold. Yet deep inside she knows her own worth. She is more than a consort, more than a vessel for an heir. She has seen her father's court, felt the pulse of empire beneath her feet, and learned the hidden language of gods and men. When she stands beside her husband during the festivals of Amun, you can almost feel the weight of prophecy around her. The people cheer for the young pharaoh, but their eyes drift to the queen who stands so still and regal her bearing, calm her gaze, unflinching. There is strength there, quiet but immense, as if Amun himself has whispered secrets into her ear. In her, Egypt's two halves, masculine and feminine, mortal and divine, seem to find an uncanny harmony. The world does not yet realize it, but the woman who walks beside Thutmose II will one day wear the double crown herself. She will rule not as queen or regent, but as pharaoh, a living god. For now she waits. And as the years pass, the river flows on, carrying with it the sands of time and the whispers of destiny. The city of Thebes grows brighter, its temples reaching ever higher toward the heavens. Within their sacred halls, priests chant prophecies of divine birth and cosmic order, prophecies that seem somehow to circle back to one extraordinary woman. Soon the gods will call to her. And when they do, the daughter of Amun will rise. Daughter of Amun, childhood, education, and the divine claim. The night deepens over Thebes, and the great desert sky unfolds above you like a scroll of stars. The constellations shimmer, the same stars that guided ancient priests and kings, the same lights that once watched over the young Hatshepsut as she took her first careful steps through the polished courtyards of her father's palace. You can almost hear the echoes of her laughter among the carved columns and painted halls. Yet even in childhood, she is no ordinary royal child. You sense it in the quiet way she carries herself, in the careful way she listens. Her tutors speak of laws, rituals, hieroglyphs, and she absorbs them all. For Hatshepsut is being raised not merely as a princess, but as one who must understand Egypt itself, its gods, its cycles, its power. Her father Thutmose, I believe, the true kingship is born of divine order, of Ma'at, the cosmic balance. So he fills his daughter's life with priests and scribes, astronomers and generals. They teach her how to read the stars to mark the flooding of the Nile, how to weigh silver for the temple treasuries, how to speak with grace to nobles and supplicants alike. She learns the Heka, the sacred magic of words, and how the very act of speaking a name can sustain the soul of the kingdom. Imagine her now sitting cross-legged before her tutors, a roll of papyrus in her lap. She practices tracing the looping signs of hieroglyphs. Ankh for life was for power, Djed for stability. Each word is not just language, it is a fragment of creation itself. She learns that to write is to participate in eternity. But Hatshepsut's education reaches beyond the intellectual. She walks through the temple of Karnak at dawn, where columns tower like stone forests and incense curls toward the painted ceilings. Here, amid the chants of the priests of Amun, she feels something awaken within her, a reverence mixed with certainty. The god of Thebes is more than distant divinity to her. He is fatherly familiar. It is during these sacred years that her destiny takes a profound turn. Her father ensures she is appointed God's wife of Amun, one of the highest religious titles in Egypt. To hold it is to stand at the threshold between human and divine. The god's wife performs sacred rituals, bathes in holy waters, and breathes the incense meant to please the god himself. She oversees vast estates and fields belonging to the temple, commanding an income greater than most nobles. The position is political, economic, and spiritual all at once, a throne within the temple. When you imagine the young Hatshepsut performing these sacred rites, dressed in white linen and gold, you can feel the weight of destiny upon her shoulders. Her hands move in the practiced gestures of offering lotus bread and perfume before the statue of Amun. The priests bow as she passes. In this role, she is not just the pharaoh's daughter, she is the living intermediary of the god himself. And then the myth begins to take form, the story that will one day justify her impossible ascent. The priests of Amun, whispering their sacred truths, begin to tell of her divine birth. According to this sacred legend, the god Amun-Ra descends from the heavens in the form of her father, Thutmose III. Entering the royal chambers, the god embraces Queen Ahmose, breathing the Ankh, the breath of life, into her. He declares that the child she will bear is no ordinary mortal, but his own daughter destined to rule Egypt. The god Khnum, the divine potter, shapes the infant Hatshepsut, and her ka, her spirit, double upon his wheel of clay, while the goddess Heket grants her life. This story, later carved in exquisite relief on her temple walls, is more than myth. It is strategy, a sacred proclamation meant to ensure no one could ever question her right to rule. For if the god himself had chosen her, then gender, custom, and tradition meant nothing. Years later, when she would be challenged for her claim to the throne, she would point to these carvings as eternal proof Amun-Ra himself made me pharaoh. You can almost hear the voices of the priests rehearsing the tale, their chants rising in the temple halls. Amun took the form of her father, and the queen knew the god by his scent of divine perfume. The story weaves through Thebes like a spell, and as Hatshepsut grows, so too does the belief that she is chosen not merely by birth, but by heaven itself. When she reaches adolescence, her father arranges her marriage to her half-brother, Thutmose II. The ceremony is splendid. The river glows with hundreds of lamps, the air heavy with lotus and myrrh. This marriage, though necessary for dynastic stability, is also symbolic, binding her to the earthly lineage of kings, while her spirit remains wedded to the divine. As the great royal wife, she assumes even greater power. She leads temple rituals, directs offerings to Amun, and manages the estates that sustain both temple and court. Her intellect and grace make her beloved by the priesthood and respected by the bureaucracy. Her titles multiply: king's daughter, king's wife, God's wife of Amun, mistress of the two lands, each one a layer of legitimacy, each one a step closer to the unthinkable. Through it all, she remains calm and watchful. The priests speak of her poise, her self-possession. She is the daughter of a god, the bride of a king, and yet, somehow, something more. Beneath the composure you sense an inner certainty, a quiet conviction that destiny is not waiting to be given, but waiting to be claimed. And as the temple drums echo across the valley, the people of Thebes begin to whisper her name with reverence. In the hush of the Karnak sanctuaries before the towering statue of Amun, the god's wife of Amun prays not as a servant, but as one who knows she is being watched and guided. The stars outside flicker, and you realize the lines between mortal and divine have already begun to blur. And as years drift on like the slow, eternal Nile, you find yourself following her again into a marriage of duty and power, where love and politics intertwine beneath the shadow of the throne. The reluctant bride marriage to Thutmose II and the shadow of succession. The torches of Thebes flicker in the evening breeze, their flames dancing against the walls of the royal courtyard. You stand amid the hush before a wedding, the kind that joins not hearts but dynasties. The priests chant softly, their words winding upward like threads of smoke toward the dark, star-sown sky. Tonight, the Princess Hatshepsut will marry her half-brother, Thutmose II. The ceremony is a spectacle of divine symbolism. Gold and lapis lazuli gleam beneath the torchlight, incense curls through the air, and the echoes of sistrums, the sacred rattles of Hathor, linger in the distance. This marriage, though grand in appearance, is not born of affection. It is a union of necessity, a weaving of bloodlines meant to secure Egypt's cosmic order, Ma'at. For Thutmose II is the son of a lesser queen, Mutnofret, while Hatshepsut is the daughter of the great royal wife, Ahmose. His claim to the throne is valid but not unassailable. Hers, on the other hand, is pure, unbroken divine. You can feel the tension in the air, even as the chants rise. The court knows that this marriage is an act of balance, binding together two halves of legitimacy. The young Thutmose stands proud, dressed in the ceremonial headdress of a king-to-be. But behind him stands a woman of greater composure and keener mind. She is radiant, but her eyes are measured. Hatshepsut knows her role, but somewhere deep within the seeds of something larger, something daring, have already taken root. When the vows are spoken, the high priest raises his hands to the heavens, invoking Amun's blessing. The drums sound and the people cheer. The kingdom rejoices. Egypt's royal line is secure, or so they believe. Yet behind the polished veneer of celebration, quiet truths whisper through the corridors of the palace. Thutmose II, though Pharaoh by title, is frail perhaps, sickly, perhaps simply unequal to the burden of his office. His reign, though gilded in official inscriptions, will be brief and fragile. When his body is found centuries later, his bones tell the story. His monuments never did lesions across the skin, signs of illness, a short, uneasy life. And so in these early years of marriage, the true strength of Egypt begins to shift. You can almost see it happening, invisible, yet inevitable. Thutmose II wears the crown, but it is Hatshepsut who commands the loyalty of the priests and the respect of the people. She remains God's wife of Amun, a position that grants her immense wealth and control over the temple's lands and granaries. Through the sacred economy of Amun's domain, she holds the pulse of the empire. In the halls of Karnak, the priests bow deeply as she enters. Her words carry the weight of divine authority. She allocates temple resources, oversees rituals, and ensures that Amun's wealth is used to uphold Ma'at. She understands every layer of the kingdom, the bureaucrats who record its grain, the artisans who shape its monuments, the farmers whose labor feeds it. She is in all but name a ruler, yet the one role she cannot yet fulfill is that of mother to a male heir. Egypt waits anxiously. The great royal wife is expected to give birth to the next pharaoh to ensure the smooth passage of power from one generation to the next. Months turn into years, but the divine blessing does not come. Instead, Hatshepsut bears a daughter, Neferu, the beauty of Ra. The child is adored, cherished, educated by the finest tutors, and trained in the temple, just as her mother once was. But she cannot inherit the throne. The dynastic balance remains delicate. As time passes, whispers creep through the court. Thutmose II, perhaps guided by advisors or simply by desperation, turns to another consort, a lesser queen named Iset. And from that union comes a son, Thutmose III, a boy who will one day become both her ward and her rival. For now, the court breathes a sigh of relief. The gods have provided a male heir, the line is secured. But this birth also deepens the fissure beneath the throne. The new prince's mother is of lesser blood, while Hatshepsut, the great royal wife, the divine daughter of Amun, remains unmatched in legitimacy. You can almost feel the quiet storm building. In the golden light of Karnak's sanctuaries, Hatshepsut continues to perform her sacred duties with unshakable calm. She makes offerings to Amun, supervises the temples, and presides over the festivals that unite the people. Yet, within her thought and ambition swirl like the eddies of the Nile. She sees the fragility of her husband's reign, the vulnerability of a child destined to rule too soon, and the vacuum of strength that will follow. When Thutmose II's health begins to fail, the court grows restless. Ministers whisper, generals glance toward the palace gates, and the priesthood looks to Hatshepsut for steadiness. She does not falter. She ensures the rituals are performed, the taxes collected, the divine order maintained. The machinery of Egypt continues to hum beneath her direction. Then one morning, the drums fall silent. The pharaoh is dead. You can almost hear the stillness that follows the deep, stunned quiet that falls over the palace like sand settling after a storm. The body of Thutmose II is wrapped in linen and perfumed for eternity, his spirit sent to join the gods. But his throne stands empty, and beside it stands a child barely old enough to walk, a boy named Thutmose III, born to a secondary wife, fragile and unready. The court turns its eyes toward Hatshepsut. She is now both widow and queen mother. But more than that, she is the last thread of legitimacy, tying this boy to the royal bloodline of Thutmose III. Without her, his claim to the throne is a hollow shell. Without her, the gods' favor falters. And so as the embalmers seal the pharaoh's tomb and the mourning chants rise over Thebes, a new order begins to take shape. Hatshepsut, the daughter of Amun, the great royal wife and mother of the princess Neferu, steps forward to serve as regent for the boy king. She will rule in his name, the guardianship of empire resting in her hands. But what begins as duty will soon become destiny. The woman who once stood behind the throne now stands beside it, and soon she will stand upon it. The throne of the boy king widowhood and the Regency crisis. Thebes is silent. The funeral chants fade into the night, and the river carries the scent of incense downstream. You find yourself standing at the edge of the royal necropolis, where the flicker of oil lamps reflects on the newly sealed tomb of Pharaoh Thutmose II. His spirit has joined the ancestors, and his body rests beneath the painted ceilings of eternity. But the living, those who remain in the world of sunlight and politics, feel the tremor of uncertainty. Egypt, though vast and mighty, stands on a knife's edge. The Pharaoh is gone, and his heir, the boy, Thutmose III, is too young to rule. In this moment of transition, all eyes turn to one figure, his stepmother, his aunt, his guardian, Hatshepsut. You watch as she walks through the palace corridors, her steps measured, her presence commanding. Gone is the role of great royal wife. In its place stands the regent of the two lands. It is a familiar pattern in Egyptian history. Queens have ruled on behalf of child kings before, but none with the pedigree, intellect, and divine claim of Hatshepsut. Her first acts are those of calm preservation. The boy Pharaoh is crowned as tradition demands. He is declared the living Horus son of Ra, ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt. But behind the golden mask of ceremony, it is Hatshepsut who speaks, Hatshepsut who commands, and Hatshepsut who ensures the wheels of empire keep turning. In this early stage, she treads with exquisite caution. Every decree bears both their names. In public reliefs, she stands a step behind the boy as propriety dictates. To the nobles, she is the dutiful aunt. To the priesthood, the pious daughter of Amun. To the army, a steady hand preserving the state. Yet beneath this image of obedience lies something more deliberate, a careful consolidation of power. One by one, she places loyal men in key positions. You can almost see her at work, quietly appointing new overseers, scribes, and temple administrators. Among them rises one figure of particular brilliance, Senenmut. He begins as a steward, a man of modest birth, but exceptional skill. Under Hatshepsut's eye, he becomes her chief architect, her treasurer, her tutor, to the young princess Neferu and her most trusted advisor. His loyalty is absolute, and his genius will soon shape the very face of her reign. Through such men, Hatshepsut builds her foundation. She ensures the temples are well funded, the grain stores full, and the priests of Amun, whose influence can raise or ruin a ruler, remain steadfastly in her favor. Egypt prospers under her administration, and the people begin to murmur her name with reverence. The regent who brings stability is always loved, at least at first. But as the years flow like the Nile, the balance begins to shift. The boy Pharaoh grows, but his power does not. The courtiers petition Hatshepsut, not him. The scribes write to her. The soldiers report to her. In every corner of the kingdom, the reality becomes undeniable. Though the child wears the crown, it is she who rules. You can feel her awareness of this truth. Each festival, each public appearance is orchestrated with purpose. At Karnak, the grand temple of Amun, she steps into the sanctuary with the authority of one chosen by the god himself. The chants of the priests rise echoing through the hypostyle halls. The candles flicker as if bowing to her will. Here in the holy heart of Egypt she feels her destiny pressing closer. For Hatshepsut knows what others whisper. Only in secret she is not merely regent by circumstance, she is ruler by divine decree. The story of her divine birth, long nurtured by the priesthood, begins to circulate once more. It tells of Amun himself descending to her mother's chamber, of the god's promise that his daughter would one day rule the two lands. This myth, once quiet and symbolic, begins to take on a dangerous, irresistible power. In her private chambers, she contemplates what must come next. To remain regent is to serve as a caretaker, to step aside when the boy reaches maturity. But to fulfill her destiny, the one whispered by Amun, affirmed by her bloodline, she must claim the full mantle of Pharaoh. Yet such an act would be unprecedented. A woman as king, it defies centuries of custom. It risks angering the gods, the priests, and the army. And still she feels the certainty burning within her like the midday sun. Egypt needs order, not chaos. The gods have chosen her, not the fragile boy. One morning, as dawn spills across the columns of Karnak, she enters the temple alone. The incense smoke coils upward like a question to heaven. Before the colossal statue of Amun, she kneels not in supplication, but in communion. The chamber trembles with silence. You can almost hear the whisper of the god's unseen voice. "You are my daughter, you are my chosen." When she rises, something within her has changed. The regent has made her decision. From this point forward, her steps become deliberate, her movements precise. She surrounds herself with imagery of divine sanction. Sculptors begin to carve her likeness beside that of the child Pharaoh. But gradually, subtly, she grows taller in each depiction. Inscriptions speak of her as the chosen of Amun, the one whose word is law, the living embodiment of Ma'at. She does not seize the throne in a single stroke. It is more delicate than that. It is a slow coronation of the spirit built from ritual, faith, and theatre. Each festival becomes a stage, each oracle a voice of the divine. And one day the line between regent and ruler will blur completely. For now, though, the palace sleeps beneath the soft veil of night. The boy king dreams of horses and battles, the priests dream of omens, but Hatshepsut dreams of eternity, the vision of a throne upon which she will sit not as queen, but as Pharaoh of all Egypt. The divine mandate from Regent to Pharaoh, the coup d'etat. The morning air over Thebes is golden, the temples of Karnak glowing like embers in the first light of dawn. You can hear the distant murmur of the priests preparing for the festival of Amun, the god's sacred procession through the streets. The scent of lotus myrrh and incense drifts over the city. The people gather in anticipation, unaware that today, beneath the solemn hymns and the beating drums, Egypt's destiny is quietly shifting. Years have passed since the death of Thutmose II. The boy king Thutmose III now grows toward manhood, but still his aunt, the regal and resolute Hatshepsut, rules as regent. Under her care, Egypt has known only peace, abundance, and the steady rhythm of prosperity. Yet within her a deeper certainty burns. She is not meant to hold power on behalf of another. She is meant to be Pharaoh. You can almost see her standing before the sacred lake of Karnak at sunrise. The water is still reflecting her face beside the towering pillars of Amun's temple. The priests chant softly behind her. In that reflection she sees not a woman's face, but something timeless, a vessel of divine will. For years she has ruled in name of the boy king. Now she will rule in the name of the gods. Her path to the throne is not paved in rebellion or blood. It is built from faith, ritual, and persuasion. The greatest of Egypt's powers, the priesthood of Amun, already stands behind her. As God's wife of Amun, she controls their wealth, their estates, their loyalty. She understands the language of divinity, the rhythm of ritual, the power of spectacle, and so she begins her transformation, not in war, but in ceremony. Imagine the festival of Amun in full splendor, thousands of citizens lining the processional route, the sacred bark of Amun carried on the shoulders of priests, the golden shrine glimmering beneath the sun. The air is alive with chanting drums and the deep hum of sacred horns. As the procession winds its way through the temple complex, the moment arrives. The priests halt. The bark of Amun stops before Hatshepsut. Silence ripples through the crowd. The priests sway, claiming to feel the presence of the god within the shrine, guiding their steps. Then, in a moment that will change history, the bark turns, tilting toward Hatshepsut, as if the god himself has chosen her. The high priest declares that Amun has spoken through his oracle. His daughter Hatshepsut is to rule Egypt not as regent, not as queen, but as Pharaoh, the living embodiment of Maat. The crowd erupts, the priests kneel, trumpets sound, and just like that, the will of the gods becomes the will of the people. It is not a coup, it is a coronation by heaven. From that moment, the transformation becomes official. Hatshepsut takes on the full titulary of kingship, 5 sacred names binding her to the divine cycle of rule. Her Horus name proclaims her as the living god on earth. Her 2 ladies' name ties her to the goddesses of Upper and Lower Egypt. Her golden Horus name declares her eternal power. But most telling is her throne name, the one that will echo through eternity. Ma'at-Kare Ma'at is the Ka of Ra. It is a name of perfect symmetry uniting justice and divinity. Through it, she claims to embody the order of the universe itself. You can feel the magnitude of this moment, Hatshepsut. The daughter of Amun no longer speaks as a woman among men. She speaks as the voice of the gods. Her proclamation spreads through the temples, the palaces, the granaries, and the distant fortresses of Nubia. No rebellion rises, no army marches against her. The people accept it, perhaps even with relief. Egypt has stability, wealth, and order, and the gods, through their oracle, have chosen her. Still she knows the throne cannot be held by faith alone. In Egypt, the divine must be made visible, and so she begins to reshape her image. The sculptors of Thebes receive new orders. The pharaoh is to be shown not as a woman, but as the eternal king. Statues, once soft-featured and feminine, begin to change. Shoulders broaden. The ceremonial beard of kingship is added. The royal kilt replaces the gown. The crown of Upper and Lower Egypt rests on her brow. You can picture the artisans at work, chiseling carefully, reverently. Each hammer strike on stone is an act of theology. They are not disguising her femininity, they are transmuting it into divine form. In Egypt's sacred art, what is depicted becomes truth. By appearing as a male pharaoh, Hatshepsut is a pharaoh. In the reliefs, she stands side by side with Thutmose III, the boy she still calls her co-regent. But gradually her figure grows taller, her name appears first. She is the senior ruler, the embodiment of divine order. Her temple inscriptions declare that her coronation was not her will, but Amun's. It was he who placed me on the throne of the living while I was still a child, and I ruled by his command. This sacred narrative shields her from accusation. She has not defied tradition, she has fulfilled prophecy. At Karnak, the priests honor her as the chosen daughter of the god. The people see her as the bringer of peace and plenty. The officials and scribes recognize her unmatched wisdom, and the boy king remains untouched, preserved as symbol and heir, while she reigns in power and in glory. Under her hand the realm thrives. The fields are fertile, the temples grow rich, and the scent of incense rises to please the gods. Egypt's borders hold firm, and trade routes hum with life. Yet in the stillness of the temple nights you can almost feel her solitude, the weight of what she has done. To step beyond the role of woman, wife, and regent to claim divinity itself demands not only courage, but certainty. She must live not as mortal, but as myth. And so she does. Her new name, Ma'at-Kare, echoes through the halls of Karnak and across the sands of the Nile. The divine daughter of Amun now sits upon the throne of the two lands, not as a symbol, but as Pharaoh in truth. The impossible has been achieved without a sword drawn, without a drop of blood spilled. The gods have spoken, and Egypt listens. The art of legitimacy, the transformation into a king. Morning sunlight floods the courtyards of Thebes, glinting off polished limestone walls and painted pillars. The chants of Amun's priests rise with the dawn echoing through the vast temple complex. You walk among the workers and sculptors, watching their hands shape eternity from stone. Everywhere you look, new statues are being carved, massive, regal, and unmistakably royal. Yet something unusual draws your eye. The face that emerges from the rock is that of Hatshepsut, though now she is no longer depicted as a queen. The lines of her jaw are stronger, her chest is broad. Upon her chin rests the braided ceremonial beard of a pharaoh. The artisans work in silence, their movements deliberate, reverent. They are not simply sculpting a ruler, they are redefining what a ruler can be. You pause to take it in, a woman made divine, immortal, reshaped into the eternal image of kingship. For centuries, the image of a pharaoh has been fixed, unchanging, masculine, godlike. To rule Egypt is to embody the living Horus, the falcon of the heavens. The king is not a person, but an incarnation of cosmic balance, of Ma'at. To break that image would be to fracture the very order of the world. But Hatshepsut Ma'at understands something profound. She does not need to break the image. She only needs to inhabit it. And so she begins the great work of legitimization, not with soldiers, but with sculptors, scribes, and the language of divine art. You can almost see her in her palace chambers, surrounded by papyrus scrolls and priests. She speaks quietly, confidently, outlining how her reign will appear to the gods and to history. Her artists listen and take notes, their reed pens scratching softly in the silence. She commands them not to hide her truth, but to express it in sacred form. In every temple and inscription, her names now appear in the masculine form of Pharaoh. The grammar shifts, the hieroglyphs change. Even her pronouns, once feminine, now transform into the masculine, yet she never denies her womanhood. In the temples of Amun, she remains the daughter of Ra. In official royal inscriptions, she is His Majesty. Both identities coexist perfectly balanced, just as Ma'at demands. You walk through the workshops of Thebes and see the duality everywhere. In one hall, a relief shows her kneeling before Amun, offering incense. Her body is slender, her features soft, but she wears the false beard of a king. In another, she stands erect and powerful muscles carved in idealized symmetry, holding the crook and flail, the emblems of kingship. Each depiction is a statement to her people and her gods. Gender may shape the body, but divinity shapes the soul. The artists of Egypt understand they do not paint her as pretending to be a man. They paint her as Pharaoh itself, a sacred role that transcends flesh. You can feel the quiet genius in this transformation. By appearing as a male pharaoh, she does not reject her identity. She elevates it beyond the limits of custom. The people see her not as a woman in disguise, but as the living Horus chosen by Amun. It is a political triumph and a theological masterpiece. Her sculptors chisel her new image in temples from Thebes to Nubia. Her throne name Ma'at gleams in every inscription. Her statues rise at Karnak, at Deir el-Bahari, and at the entrances to shrines that line the Nile. On each monument she stands shoulder to shoulder with the great kings who came before her, Thutmose III, Amenhotep, and Ahmose. The message is clear: her reign is not an aberration. It is a continuation of divine order. The priests of Amun, too, weave her story into the sacred texts. In public ceremonies, they proclaim her birth as the daughter of the god. They speak of how Amun visited her mother in divine form and declared, "My daughter shall rule all Egypt." It is said that when Amun appeared to her in a dream, he called her not my child, but my son. These words, carved in stone, echo through the halls of Karnak. It is she who shall sit upon the throne of Horus, as I have decreed. Hatshepsut takes care to ensure that every part of her image radiates legitimacy. Her statues are painted in the reddish tones traditionally used for male pharaohs. She wears the Nem's headdress, striped in gold and blue, and around her waist hangs the stiff, royal kilt, the shendit. The divine beard, long and plaited, marks her as both mortal and god. You sense that she understands the power of illusion, that in Egypt the boundary between art and reality is porous. What is shown becomes what is true. By depicting herself as Pharaoh, she becomes Pharaoh. Yet there are moments when the mask slips, if only slightly. In private statues in lesser temples, her true face still lingers, gentler, unmistakably feminine. These images seem to whisper her dual truth, the ruler and the woman, the god and the mother, the strength and the softness that together sustain the world. As the years pass, her vision takes root. The people no longer question her. The priests invoke her name in prayer. Foreign envoys bow before her throne and address her as Your Majesty. Egypt itself seems to breathe easier beneath her calm hand. There is order, there is peace, and there is prosperity. Still whispers travel through the palace. Some nobles murmur that Thutmose III, the young co-regent, is growing restless in the shadows. He is the rightful heir, the blood of Thutmose II, but he is also her nephew, her ward, and her subject. For now, he obeys. For now, Egypt accepts the balance. The transformation of Hatshepsut is nearly complete. She has become what the gods willed and what history demanded of Pharaoh in every sense. Yet she knows that legitimacy once claimed must be cemented not only through image and ritual, but through the works of her reign. You can feel her thoughts turning toward something new, creation architecture, and glory in stone. To be Pharaoh is to build, to leave monuments that will speak for eternity. And in this next chapter, her name will be written not only in hieroglyphs, but in the very face of the cliffs that cradle the Valley of the Kings. The winds over Thebes grow warm as you walk once more along the Nile. The sound of chisels rings faintly in the distance. The Pharaoh's next act has begun. The architects of glory Hatshepsut and Senenmut a partnership. The sun rises slowly over Thebes, painting the cliffs of the western desert in hues of gold and rose. Across the Nile, the city stirs awake, the hum of merchants, the rustle of palms, the sound of temple drums calling the priests to prayer. And there on the eastern bank, the pharaoh Hatshepsut stands at the edge of her balcony, gazing westward toward the land of eternity. Her thoughts are no longer on the fragile politics of succession. They are on creation, on the legacy she will leave carved in stone. Egypt is at peace. The granaries are full, the Nile floods faithfully, and the gods are pleased. It is the perfect time to build, to let art and architecture mirror divine order. Yet no pharaoh builds alone. To translate vision into stone, Hatshepsut will need an architect, a mind as disciplined as hers, a soul as devoted, a hand as steady. That man is Senenmut. You can almost see him now, walking through the scaffolding of Karnak temple, head-shaved linen robes powdered with dust scrolls tucked under his arm. He was not born noble, nor raised to power. He rose by merit alone, his genius recognized early in the royal court. As steward of the princess Neferua, tutor to the royal child and trusted advisor to Hatshepsut, he has become indispensable. It is said that Hatshepsut saw in him a reflection of her own spirit, disciplined, creative visionary. Where others saw limits, they saw possibilities. Together they would reshape Egypt's landscape. You can feel the quiet rhythm between them two minds in perfect harmony. In the royal audience chambers, Senenmut presents his architectural sketches carefully drawn on smooth limestone flakes. Hatshepsut studies them with sharp eyes, occasionally adjusting a line or suggesting a column's height. She is not a distant monarch giving orders, she is an artist of empire. Their greatest creation begins to take form in her imagination, a mortuary temple, unlike any before it, one that will rise not from the flat plains, but from the cliffs themselves. It will be both earthly and celestial, merging architecture with the mountainside stone with sky. And so they choose the place Deir el-Bahari, the monastery of the north, a sacred site already hallowed by the presence of Mentuhotep II's temple. It lies nestled beneath the sheer limestone cliffs that glow like ivory at dusk. There Hatshepsut will build her eternal house, Djeser Djeseru, the Holy of Holies. The project begins with thousands of workers and artisans laboring beneath the desert sun. You can almost hear the echo of chisels against stone, the deep rhythmic chant of the laborers keeping time. Senenmut oversees every measurement, every angle, his eyes scanning the cliffs for perfection. Hatshepsut herself visits the site, often her presence quiet but commanding. She stands among the scaffolds as her temple rises tier by tier, her vision unfolding into reality. 3 great terraces climb the slope, linked by wide ramps and flanked by colonnades of slender pillars. The columns mirror the cliffs behind them, blending human art with nature's grandeur. At the temple's heart, sanctuaries are carved deep into the living rock chambers for Amun, for Hathor, for Anubis, and for the Pharaoh herself. When you walk among these halls in your mind's eye, the beauty takes your breath away. Reliefs line the walls in vivid colour, the queen as Pharaoh, offering incense to the gods, processions of priests bearing sacred vessels, the great expeditions that bring foreign treasures to Egypt. Every carving is both history and prayer art, and propaganda, devotion and destiny. Senenmut designs every detail with mathematical precision. The temple aligns perfectly with the axis of the rising sun. At the winter solstice on that sacred day, the light of dawn pierces through the temple's halls, illuminating the sanctuary of Amun. It is as if heaven itself affirms her rule, but the temple is more than a monument. It is theology carved in limestone. Its terraces represent the ascent from earth to heaven. Its symmetry reflects the order of Ma'at. Its harmony between mountain and structure proclaims that Hatshepsut's reign is the meeting point of mortal and divine. The people who work there whisper her name with reverence. She is Pharaoh, yes, but also the builder queen, the bringer of prosperity, the daughter of Amun, whose reign has brought peace and glory. And in the midst of it all, her bond with Senenmut deepens. History does not tell their secrets, but the silence of the record speaks volumes. His name appears carved behind temple walls in chambers not meant for public eyes. His likeness stands near hers on stele, a privilege unheard of for one not of royal blood. He holds unprecedented titles, overseer of all works of the king, steward of the god's wife, chief architect of Amun's house. You can sense the trust between them, perhaps even affection, an intimacy born of shared purpose. She relies on him utterly. He, in turn, devotes his life to her service, building not only her monuments but her memory. Within the royal court, whispers begin to circulate. Some call him her confidant, others her consort. But Hatshepsut cares little for gossip. She rules as Pharaoh, and in the eyes of the gods her partnership with Senenmut is a tool of divine creation. Year after year, Djeser rises higher, more radiant. It becomes a place of pilgrimage, a vision of sacred perfection. When it is completed, it glows beneath the desert sun like a celestial staircase leading the soul from the world of mortals to the realm of the gods. And as she walks its terraces for the first time, her heart must swell with quiet triumph. The temple is not merely her tomb, it is her testament. It speaks not of death, but of divine harmony, eternal order, and the power of vision. Even now, centuries later, when the sand has swallowed empires and the paint has faded from her reliefs, the temple of Hatshepsut endures. Its colonnades still rise against the cliffs like music frozen in stone, a monument to the woman who refused to be forgotten. And as the desert wind sighs through its empty halls, you can almost hear her voice still echoing in the silence, the Pharaoh who built, not for herself, but for eternity. And as the sun sinks behind the cliffs, you feel the story deepening. The monuments are built, the kingdom thrives, and the legacy of Hatshepsut grows stronger with each passing year. Yet beyond the horizon, a new challenge begins to take shape, the distant lands calling for trade, the treasures that will soon cross the sea. The voyage to Punt, Egypt's golden expedition. The morning air of Thebes is thick with anticipation. The Nile glimmers like polished bronze beneath the sun, and the harbour teems with the sound of hammer and ropewood and bronze. Ships are being prepared, grand vessels unlike any seen in generations. Sailors call to one another as they load casks of water, baskets of food, coils of rope, and the fragrant resins that will preserve their offerings. You stand among them, feeling the hum of purpose in the air. It is not war these ships will sail toward, but something older, more sacred. Egypt is preparing for a voyage across the Red Sea to the mysterious Land of Punt. The land of the gods, Hatshepsut, has dreamed of this expedition for years. For her, it is more than commerce, it is a spiritual mission, a renewal of divine connection. Punt, the ancient homeland of incense and gold, of ebony and exotic beasts, has long held a mythic place in Egypt's imagination. To the Pharaoh, this journey will be proof of her divine favor and her ability to command the farthest edges of the known world. In the grand halls of Karnak, the decree is spoken. The queen, now Pharaoh Maatkare, summons her officials, priests, and captains. You can imagine her voice calm but commanding. Let the ships sail southward upon the Nile, and from there across the mountains and the sea. Bring back the gifts of the gods that Egypt may prosper, and Amun may be pleased. At her side stands Senenmut, the ever-faithful architect and overseer, coordinating every detail of this daring venture. The carpenters of Thebes work day and night under his direction, constructing great ships of cedar and acacia, wide of hull and strong of beam. Each vessel is fitted with sails of woven flax, painted with the sacred emblems of Amun and the double crown of the Pharaoh. When the ships are ready, A grand ceremony blesses their departure. The priests of Amun perform the sacred rites. Incense swirls in the air as sacred oil is poured upon the prows, and Hatshepsut herself raises her hands to the sky in prayer. The people watch in awe as their pharaoh, radiant in gold and white linen, calls upon the winds of the north to fill the sails. And so the fleet departs. The journey to Punt begins in silence and ends in legend. You can almost feel the rhythm of the oars dipping into the Nile, hear the creak of wood as the ships move southward, passing through lands of reed and sand. The voyage leads beyond Egypt's borders through Wadi Hammamat across the desert to the port of Mersa Gawasis on the Red Sea, where the waters stretch endlessly toward the horizon. For days and nights they sail eastward under a canopy of blazing stars. The air smells of salt and resin, and the men sing hymns to the gods to steady their courage. They follow the winds and the currents until at last the lookout shouts a faint, dark line on the horizon, the coast of Punt. The land of the gods rises from the sea like a mirage hills, draped in myrrh trees, the air heavy with spice and perfume. Smoke rises from distant hearths, and the scent of incense mingles with the sea breeze. As the Egyptians approach, they are greeted not with hostility, but welcome. The rulers of Punt, King Pharaoh and Queen Ati, come forth with gifts, their people adorned with ivory, gold jewelry, and animal skins. The Puntites lead them to their homes, built upon stilts above the water, showing them treasures unlike any found in the Nile Valley. Myrrh trees, gold dust panther skins, baboons, and exotic birds with feathers of iridescent blue. The Egyptians bring offerings of their own, jewelry beads of faience, daggers with gilded hilts, and fine linen woven from Theban looms. The exchange is not merely trade, it is ceremony, a renewal of an ancient alliance between two lands beloved by the gods. You can almost see the scenes unfolding as they would later be carved into the walls of Djeser Egyptian sailors leading myrrh trees in baskets of soil, their roots still damp with the scent of Punt's earth. Women of Punt carrying baskets of gold and incense, Queen Ati full-bodied and resplendent in her jewels, greeting the emissaries beneath the palm trees. Each carving tells the story not just of trade, but of wonder. Egypt, the land of order and sun, reaching out to the unknown, and returning with proof that the world itself bends to its pharaoh's will. After months abroad, the fleet returns to Thebes. The harbour fills with the scent of foreign perfumes, the air rich with spice and song. The people gather in thousands to watch the ships unload their treasures, chests of electrum ebony gold leopard skins, ivory tusks, and the living myrrh trees carefully planted in baskets of Nile mud, ready to take root in Egypt's soil. Hatshepsut stands at the docks as the procession unfolds before her. The priests praise her name, calling her beloved of Amun, who brings the wealth of foreign lands to Egypt. The people cheer as she dedicates the bounty to her temple at Deir el-Bahari. There the scenes of the voyage are immortalized in relief still visible millennia later, telling of the pharaoh who sent ships beyond the known world. The Punt expedition becomes one of the crowning glories of her reign. It symbolizes not conquest but harmony, the blending of faith, trade, and diplomacy. In it, Hatshepsut reveals the kind of ruler she has always been, visionary, patient, and guided by divine purpose. The incense from Punt burns in every temple. The air of Thebes carries its fragrance. The god Amun is pleased, and Egypt under her hand flourishes like never before. As night falls over Thebes, you imagine her standing again, upon her balcony, gazing at the river below. The air is thick with the scent of the very myrrh trees brought from Punt. Their leaves shimmer in the moonlight, a living memory of the voyage that carried her name beyond the horizon. And as the breeze carries the perfume of foreign lands across the Nile, you feel the pulse of empire beating steady and calm. Hatshepsut has proven that peace can build what war cannot. Yet in her triumph, the shadows of ambition begin to stir once more. The golden rain prosperity and the temple of Amun. The Nile glows like liquid gold beneath the midday sun. You stand upon its bank as the waters move with slow majesty, mirroring the prosperity that fills all Egypt. The harvests are abundant, the granaries overflowing. In the streets of Thebes, artisans carve in alabaster, and gold priests chant beneath towering columns, and merchants bring silk spices and incense from every corner of the known world. This is the age of Hatshepsut's golden reign, a time when peace and piety walk hand in hand. There is no war to drain Egypt's lifeblood, no rebellion to mar its balance. Instead, there is order, purpose, and beauty. The gods are honored, the people fed, and the kingdom's heart beats in rhythm with the divine. You can almost feel the calm pulse of Thebes itself. The air hums with a quiet certainty, the sense that Egypt is living in harmony with Ma'at, the eternal order of the universe. Hatshepsut, now in the fullness of her power, rules not through conquest, but through creation. Her authority flows not from the sword, but from vision. And at the center of her vision stands the god who has guided her from birth, Amun of Thebes, the hidden one, father of gods and men. Every morning, the pharaoh walks in procession through the halls of Karnak. The air is heavy with incense, the pillars glow with color. Priests bow low as she passes, their heads shaven, their voices murmuring ancient prayers. She ascends the temple steps to present her offerings, bread, wine, oil, and flowers to the god who gave her life and crown. Before the massive statue of Amun she kneels. The stone face gazes down in eternal silence, yet she feels his presence as a warmth in her chest, a whisper in her mind. You are my chosen one, Ma'at. Through you Egypt thrives. Her devotion is not mere ritual. It is personal, almost tender. In her reign, she has rebuilt and expanded the temple of Amun with splendor unmatched since the earliest dynasties. She has adorned its courtyards with new obelisks of red granite brought from the quarries of Aswan. They gleam like captured sunlight, their tips gilded with electrum, so that even from miles away they shimmer like twin spears of fire piercing the sky. Imagine the journey of these obelisks, the months of quarrying, the labor of thousands as they carve the sacred pillars from the red cliffs, then drag them across sand and river on massive barges. When they arrive at Karnak, the priests and people gather to watch them raised inch by ropes, pulleys, and sheer human strength. When at last the obelisks stand upright, their surfaces are inscribed with her devotion. I have done this from love of you, O Amun, that my name may endure in this temple forever. The inscriptions speak not of pride, but of reverence. To Hatshepsut, these monuments are not symbols of her power, they are prayers in stone, gifts to the god who legitimized her rule. Under her command, Karnak becomes a living testament to divine order. New pylons rise, painted in vivid colors, sacred lakes shimmer beside the courtyards, shrines multiply like stars across the temple grounds. The temple's treasury grows rich with gold from Nubia and incense from Punt. Each morning the priests open the doors of the sanctuary to greet Amun's statue, awakening him with hymns and offerings. In return, the god blesses Egypt with abundance. The floods come on time, the crops grow tall, the people live in contentment. You wander through the temple in your mind, feeling the cool stone beneath your hands, the scent of lotus and cedar in the air. You hear the rhythm of drums, the echo of chants rising into the sky. It is not difficult to believe that the gods walk among mortals here. Outside the temples, prosperity blooms as well. The roads a safe trade flourishes, and cities expand. Art and architecture reach new heights. The craftsmen of Thebes carve intricate jewelry inlay furniture with ivory and paint tomb walls with scenes of daily life in bright pigments that seem almost alive. Hatshepsut's officials oversee vast estates of grain and cattle. Her treasuries overflow with wealth, but she does not hoard it for luxury. She spends it on construction, on temples, roads, canals, and shrines projects that employ thousands and bind the people's loyalty through shared purpose. Her reign becomes a golden age of creativity and faith, where the line between art and worship vanishes. Every chisel strike is a prayer, every pigment stroke a hymn. Still behind the peace and splendor lies a quiet awareness, the delicate balance she must maintain. Thutmose III, her co-regent and stepson, is growing older. He has been raised as a soldier trained by generals beloved by the army. For now he accepts his place beside her, perhaps even admires her wisdom. But beneath the calm surface the question lingers. What happens when the boy becomes a man? For Hatshepsut, the answer lies in permanence. She cannot control what the future holds, but she can shape how she will be remembered. Through the temples of Karnak, through the reliefs of Deir el-Bahari, through the very stone of Egypt itself, she writes her story into eternity. Her architects carve her name into every monument, not as a woman, not as a queen, but as Pharaoh, equal to the gods, eternal as the sun. Each obelisk and shrine becomes her voice across time, proclaiming, "I ruled Egypt as Amun's chosen. I brought peace, not war. I built for the gods, not for myself." The years flow like the Nile. Seasons pass, and her kingdom shines brighter than ever. The gods are honored, the people content. The name of Hatshepsut Ma'at-Kare, spoken in reverence from Nubia to the Delta. And as the evening settles over Thebes, you imagine her once more upon her balcony, the sunset bathing her temple in red light. The obelisks gleam, and she whispers a prayer to the horizon that the peace she has built may outlast her flesh, and that her name may live for all eternity. And as the stars appear over the Valley of the Kings, you sense that eternity drawing closer. Her works stand tall, her power secure. Yet time is never still, and even the most divine of reigns must one day face the shadow of change. The prince in waiting, Thutmose III, and the shadow of the throne. The sun rises over Thebes once more, gilding the temples, the river, and the distant cliffs of Deir el-Bahari in warm gold. The city stirs with life, the laughter of market vendors, the chants of priests, the rumble of oxen carts moving through the dust. Yet within the palace walls a different rhythm hums beneath the peace. Time is moving, and with it the shape of destiny. Years have passed since Hatshepsut took the throne. Her reign has brought stability, wealth, and beauty beyond compare. Egypt has flourished as though kissed by the gods themselves, but now the boy who once played at her feet has grown into a man, Thutmose III. The prince in waiting, the heir in shadow, has come of age. You can imagine him now, standing in the training grounds beside the Theban cliffs. The heat shimmers around him. His arms glisten with sweat as he draws his bow and looses an arrow that strikes the target cleanly at its center. The soldiers around him cheer. The young prince smiles a rare, guarded smile, but his eyes are hard. In his veins flows the blood of warriors. He is his father's son, restless and ambitious. For all his life he has known two truths, that he is Pharaoh by right, and that another sits upon his throne. It is a quiet tension that hums through the royal court, never spoken aloud, but felt in every corridor. Hatshepsut is still revered as Pharaoh wise, pious, the daughter of Amun, who built temples that touched the sky. But beneath the reverence lies unease. The army, ever loyal to its generals, whispers the young prince's name with growing fervor. The priests of Amun, though indebted to Hatshepsut's generosity, begin to wonder how long the divine balance can endure, two living Horuses, two suns sharing the same sky. And yet in public harmony reigns. Hatshepsut treats Thutmose with dignity, calling him her co-ruler. He appears at festivals dressed in the regalia of kingship, standing beside her in the processions. But the artists of Thebes, ever attuned to the truth behind ceremony, carve his figure smaller than hers. On temple walls she towers her name, written first, her titles filling the columns of hieroglyphs. He is the lesser son, orbiting the greater. In private, perhaps, she still feels affection for him. This boy she raised, the son of her late husband, the child who once clung to her robes, but she is Pharaoh now, and Pharaoh cannot share the throne. Power once tasted cannot be easily relinquished. You can sense her awareness of this, how she maintains her hold, not through cruelty, but through precision. Every decree, every festival, every building project reinforces her legitimacy. The divine birth of Hatshepsut is carved and painted again, and again Amun, choosing her before she was born, Khnum shaping her body on his potter's wheel, the gods crowning her long before mortal life began. These images do not merely glorify, they remind the people that her authority is cosmic, eternal, unchallengeable. Meanwhile, Thutmose III bides his time. Hatshepsut appoints him commander of the army, perhaps to honor him, perhaps to distance him from Thebes. He accepts the role with outward obedience. He leads expeditions along Egypt's borders, strengthening the garrisons, earning the loyalty of soldiers who see in him the vigor of youth and the promise of war. In the hush of her chambers, Hatshepsut must sometimes ponder what lies ahead. She has achieved what no woman before her dared to dream. She has ruled as Pharaoh for years, not as regent or queen, but as the living embodiment of Ma'at. Yet she knows the gods measure all things by balance. The river rises and falls, the sun sets and returns, and every reign, no matter how divine, must one day yield to the next. Still she continues her work with calm certainty. She adds chapels to the temple of Amun, expands the roadways of Thebes, and oversees new obelisks raised to pierce the sky. Her architects continue their labor, her priests their hymns. But there is a subtle change in the tone of her monuments. The early inscriptions speak of divine destiny, of gods who crowned her. The later ones grow more personal, more reflective, praising her wisdom, her achievements, her devotion. It is as though she senses the sands of time shifting beneath her feet. In the military camps beyond the Nile, the soldiers whisper of Thutmose III's brilliance. They call him the hawk, for his eyes miss nothing, and his movements strike like wind through reeds. His mind is sharp, his charisma magnetic. He has waited in patience, honoring the god's will, serving under the shadow of his stepmother. But his destiny too burns brightly, and one day soon it will demand its due. Back in Thebes, the people still adore their pharaoh. They chant her names during festivals, offer prayers at her temple, and bless her image with garlands of flowers. But even devotion must bend before time. Those who once hailed her rise now, whisper of what must come next. Egypt needs a strong arm for war, they say, a young pharaoh to lead the chariots to extend the borders of empire once more. Hatshepsut hears these murmurs, though no one dares speak them in her presence. And perhaps in her heart she understands. She has built her immortality in stone. Her name is written across the face of Thebes. Her obelisks gleam brighter than the sun. She has no need to cling to life's fleeting power. Her legacy is already eternal. The winds over the desert grow cooler as dusk falls. The pharaoh stands at her balcony, the light fading over the valley. The temple of Deir el-Bahari lies across the river, bathed in gold by the last rays of day. She watches the sun sink behind her eternal monument, and for the first time in years she allows herself to rest. Below in the barracks, Thutmose III trains long into the night. The torchlight gleams off his sword as he practices his strikes, his movements steady and sure. The gods are preparing him as once they prepared her. Egypt stands poised between two ages, one of peace and faith, another of conquest and fire. The gods, eternal and watchful, know that both are necessary for the balance of Maat. And as the moon rises over the silent river, you sense the slow turning of fate. The woman who ruled as a god has built her world in stone, but the prince who waits in the shadows is soon to claim his own destiny. The waning light, the final years of Hatshepsut. The sun of Thebes still burns bright, but its warmth has softened. The air feels older now, calmer, as though time itself has begun to walk slower through the city's streets. You stand once again before the palace at dawn, the great river, whispering below the sandstone walls, glowing pale gold in the first light. Egypt is still radiant, still at peace, but beneath the surface the air carries a faint stillness, the hush of something drawing near. Hatshepsut, the pharaoh who once defied all custom, is no longer the young, fearless ruler who claimed the throne by divine right. Years have etched themselves into her face, yet her bearing remains proud. She walks the halls of her palace with the slow grace of one who knows that she has already conquered the impossible. Her temples shine across Thebes, her monuments rise, as if the gods themselves carved them, and the people still speak her name with reverence. But in her eyes you sense something new, a distant gaze, reflective and private. For all her victories, all her glory, the pharaoh feels the passing of the years. The crown that once blazed with light now weighs heavy. Thutmose III, her co-ruler and stepson, has grown into a man of formidable strength and discipline. The soldiers worship him. His campaigns beyond Egypt's borders have begun to stir. The boy who once lived in her shadow now casts his own. And yet the relationship between them remains a mystery wrapped in ceremony. On the temple walls their names are still carved side by side, hers first, his second. But in the gatherings of the court he stands a little taller, his voice firmer, his retinue larger. The balance of power shifts quietly like the slow turning of the Nile. You can almost see them in those final years, the aging pharaoh and her co-ruler standing together in the great courtyard of Karnak. Around them, incense drifts in coils of white smoke, the sacred obelisks gleam, and the chants of Amun's priests rise to the heavens. Between them lies not enmity but inevitability. Each knows their place in the unfolding design of fate. Hatshepsut spends her final years devoted to the gods. Her architects continue to add shrines to Deir el-Bahari. Her sculptors perfect the reliefs of her greatest deeds, and her priests maintain endless offerings to Amun. She ensures that her daughter Neferua is honored, though history's silence swallows the girl's fate. Perhaps Neferua died young, her tomb unmarked. Perhaps her loss deepened the pharaoh's solitude. Still Hatshepsut's will remains unbroken. Her reign has stretched nearly 2 decades, a span longer and more peaceful than many male kings before her. The world she built feels eternal, the roads smooth, the canals flowing the gods' content. Yet deep down she knows eternity belongs only to the stone. Flesh fades. Only legacy endures. One evening you find her standing before the holy lake of Karnak. The water glimmers with the reflection of her obelisks, their golden tips piercing the twilight. She gazes into the mirrored surface and sees not herself, but the image of Ma'at, the harmony she has served all her life. She whispers softly into the wind, "I have done this for you, O Amun. I have brought peace. I have upheld your order." Her attendants stand quietly behind her, unsure whether she speaks to the gods or to the ages. Perhaps both. There are no records of her death. The scribes who chronicled every conquest and offering fall silent when her life draws to a close. Some say she died peacefully in her palace. Others claim illness, a quiet withdrawal from the world she once ruled. The truth is hidden like so much in the desert's heart. What is known is this one day her name ceased to appear on new monuments. The titles of Pharaoh passed to Thutmose III alone, and soon after the chisels began their quiet work. You can almost hear them, the slow, methodical tap of stonecutters removing her name from the walls, erasing her face from the reliefs. Across Egypt from Thebes to Nubia, her cartouches are scratched out, her statues defaced, her memory slowly undone. The woman who once ruled as a god is made invisible, as though the priests feared that even her name carried power enough to live again. Was it vengeance, jealousy, or the simple act of rebalancing divine order, restoring the throne to its rightful male lineage? The reasons are lost to time. What remains is the silence of her absence. But stone-like truth has a long memory. The erasures could not hide what she built. Beneath the chiseled scars her name endures, faintly, still the ghost of a queen who refused to vanish. Her temple at Deir el-Bahari still stands untouched by time, its terraces glowing in the desert light like a stairway to heaven. And if you listen closely, the stones still speak her story. They whisper of a woman who dared to rule as Pharaoh, who built monuments that challenged the desert itself, who sent ships beyond the edge of the world. They whisper of peace, prosperity, and divine favor, the reign of Ma'at-Kare Hatshepsut, the Pharaoh who became eternal. Centuries later, long after her memory was buried beneath sand and silence, explorers would unearth her name once more. They would find her temple, her obelisks, her statues, her story. The world would remember the forgotten Pharaoh. And history would speak her truth again. As the stars brighten above Thebes, you imagine her soul sailing down the celestial Nile, the bar of Hatshepsut shining among the constellations. She has joined the gods, she served her name, restored in the halls of eternity. Her monuments still stand where she left them, stone against sky order, against chaos, beauty against time. And even now the winds that pass through the colonnades of Deir el-Bahari seem to carry her voice. I am the daughter of Amun. I am Ma'at-Kare. I have built this for eternity. And as you turn away from the glowing cliffs of Thebes, you feel the peace of her legacy settle in your heart. The night deepens, the stars shimmer, and the world of Egypt, ancient, serene, immortal, rests beneath her eternal gaze. The Erasure, Thutmose III, and the shadow of memory. The morning light falls across the cliffs of western Thebes, touching the pale terraces of Deir el-Bahari. The temple gleams as if newly made, its columns glowing against the golden limestone. Yet the sound that now echoes through its halls is not the music of priests or the murmur of prayers. It is the dull, rhythmic tap of chisels, stonecutters working under quiet orders. You walk among them in your mind's eye, feeling the solemn weight of their task. The men carve carefully, deliberately, striking away, not to create but to remove. Line by line they erase the name of Ma'at-Kare Hatshepsut from her own walls. Hieroglyphs that once sang her divine titles, beloved of Amun, daughter of Ra, the perfect god, are ground into silence. The image of her face, once serene and proud, is struck from the stone. This is how history forgets, not in one blow but in countless small ones. Thutmose III now rules alone. The young prince who once lived in her shadow has become one of Egypt's greatest warrior kings. His armies march north and south, conquering lands from Syria to Nubia. Gold flows into Egypt's treasuries, and his name rings with triumph. Yet beneath the glory of his reign lies the ghost of another, the woman who once held the crown he now wears. No record tells us when the order came. Perhaps it was soon after her death, or perhaps years later when Thutmose had grown secure in power. But one day the Pharaoh commanded that Hatshepsut's name be removed from every monument, her image destroyed, her legacy rewritten. You wonder why. Was it vengeance for years of rule denied to him? Was it anger, the resentment of a man forced to kneel before the woman who raised him? Or was it something colder, more political, the desire to restore the natural order, to erase the unprecedented reign of a female pharaoh, and ensure that no one would ever question the divine pattern again? Whatever the reason, the erasure spreads across Egypt like a quiet tide. At Karnak, her cartouches are hacked out from the obelisks she once raised to the heavens. At Luxor, her statues are defaced, her likeness shattered. In the records of temple scribes, her name is replaced by that of her father, Thutmose, or of Thutmose III himself. On walls once filled with her victories, the story is rewritten. The images of her coronation, her divine birth, her voyages to Punt, all reattributed to others or left blank. And yet the erasure is not complete. In some places her name remains untouched, hidden in corners the chisels never reached. In others, her images are simply plastered over, not destroyed. Perhaps even the workmen hesitated, unable to bring themselves to annihilate what was once so holy. Perhaps they too felt that the daughter of Amun still watched. You stand now before the temple of Deir el-Bahari, its silence heavy with memory. Though her name has been scratched away, her presence lingers in every stone. The architecture is unmistakably hers, graceful, symmetrical, serene. The very cliffs seem to cradle it, like a mother guarding her child. Across the river at Karnak, her obelisks still stand. Even when Thutmose III built walls around them to hide them from view, their golden tips pierce the sky. And when the sunlight strikes them at dawn, it is as if they whisper her name once more. There is a paradox in this destruction. For in erasing her, Thutmose ensures she will never be forgotten. The scars left behind, those empty cartouches, those faceless statues, become louder than silence. Each mark of removal tells the story of what once was of the Pharaoh who ruled the woman who defied the daughter of a god who refused to vanish. And perhaps in his own way Thutmose understood this. Perhaps his actions were not born solely of anger, but of reverence, twisted by fear, fear of her memory, fear of her endurance. To rule after Hatshepsut was to live forever in her shadow, to compete not against a mortal predecessor, but against an ideal. She had ruled without war, without bloodshed, and yet with more strength than any general. Her monuments outshone all others. Her peace had become legend, so he sought to write his own story atop hers. In time, Thutmose III became known as the Napoleon of Egypt, leading 17 campaigns across the Near East. He built new temples, new tombs, new triumphs, but still Hatshepsut's works endured. Her temple at Deir el-Bahari stood untouched by age. Her obelisks defied concealment. Her spirit lingered in the rhythm of the city she had made beautiful. The priests of Amun continued to serve within the sanctuaries she built. The people, though they no longer spoke her name, still worshipped within her temples. And perhaps when they lit the incense or bowed before the rising sun, some still remembered the Pharaoh who brought peace to their land. Centuries later, sand would bury her story entirely. Her name would sleep beneath the desert, her temple half buried in silence. The Greeks and Romans who came after would know her only as a myth, the Queen of Egypt, unnamed, mysterious. But the gods, it seems, have their own memory. Millennia later, explorers and archaeologists would uncover her temple, her statues and her obelisks. They would find her mummy, long lost, re-identified only through fragments of evidence and the precision of modern science. The name Hatshepsut would rise again from the dust, bright and indomitable. And in that rediscovery she would triumph once more. The erasure that was meant to destroy her instead made her eternal. Her legacy of peace, prosperity and vision would outlive every conqueror. Her voice, once silenced, would return to tell her story in the language of stone. As you gaze once more at her temple, you feel the paradox of immortality. The pharaohs who waged war and claimed the earth are gone, their names scattered like sand. But Hatshepsut, who ruled through creation, remains. The chisels of time could not destroy what was built in harmony with the gods. The wind sighs through the colonnades of Deir el-Bahari, carrying her whisper once more, "My name is Ma'at-Kare, beloved of Amun. I have built this for eternity." And as the stars rise over the Valley of the Kings, you feel the balance of Ma'at restored the peace of creation after the storm of erasure. The afterlife of a pharaoh, rediscovery and immortality. Night has fallen over Thebes and the desert is quiet. The moonlight spills across the cliffs, touching the terraces of Deir el-Bahari with silver. The temple stands in calm defiance of time, its pillars weathered its colors, faded, yet its symmetry still perfect. The winds move softly through the colonnades, whispering in the tongue of forgotten centuries. For nearly 3,000 years, Hatshepsut has slept beneath this silence. Her name, once carved into every monument, was erased. Her statues were shattered. Her story was lost. And yet her presence lingers here, as if the stones themselves remember her. You walk through the ruins in your mind's eye. The walls that once glowed with bright pigments now bear only faint traces of red and blue. The carvings that once proclaimed her divine birth lie cracked but still legible. The scenes of her great voyage to Punt, her offering to Amun, her coronation, all remain faint yet indestructible. Every scar, every broken hieroglyph is a mark of survival. The desert keeps secrets well, but never forever. In the 19th century, when the modern world began to rediscover ancient Egypt, explorers and scholars came to these cliffs. They brushed away sand-recorded inscriptions and pieced together the fragments of a forgotten dynasty. At first, they saw the temple and assumed it belonged to a king, its scale too grand, its power too commanding to have been the work of a woman. But as the dust cleared, they found a name that had been buried in silence for millennia: Hatshepsut, daughter of Amun, lord of the two lands, Ma'at-Kare. Imagine that moment of rediscovery, the flicker of torchlight in the dark halls, the voice of an archaeologist reading her titles aloud after 3,000 years of silence. The name that had been struck from history breathes again. And as scholars begin to translate her inscriptions, her story unfolds piece by piece. They learn of the princess who became regent, the regent who became Pharaoh, the Pharaoh who built her glory in stone and peace rather than conquest. They learn of her temple at Deir el-Bahari, her obelisks at Karnak, her expedition to Punt. Slowly, the image of Hatshepsut, once erased, returns to life. For a time, her mummy remains lost. The tomb of Thutmose the Mawam is found. The tomb of Thutmose III is found. But the resting place of the woman pharaoh remains a mystery. Archaeologists search the Valley of the Kings, combing through tomb after tomb, their lamps flickering in the dust. They find clues: a sarcophagus bearing her cartouche, a canopic jar with her name, but her body itself eludes them. It is not until 2007 that modern science, with its patient precision, finally restores the last piece of her story. In a forgotten tomb, KV60, a female mummy is discovered lying in plain wooden coffins, long dismissed as unremarkable. Nearby, a small box inscribed with Hatshepsut's name holds a tooth. DNA testing confirms the truth: the tooth fits perfectly. The forgotten mummy is the pharaoh herself. You can almost feel the stillness in that laboratory, the hum of the machines, the soft light reflecting off ancient linen. The face of Hatshepsut, after 30 centuries of silence, gazes back at the living world. Her bones speak the language of time. She was in her 50s when she died. She bore the signs of age and illness, but her stature remained regal. Even in death, her features echo the calm dignity seen in her statues. Her remains are carried with reverence to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, where she lies now, among the kings she once ruled beside. The scientists bow their heads before the glass case, and in their silence, she is Pharaoh once more. The rediscovery of Hatshepsut changes how the world sees Egypt and how it sees power itself. She is no longer a footnote, no longer the queen who usurped the throne. She becomes again what she always was, one of the greatest builders of her age, a ruler of peace, an innovator, a visionary. Her story becomes a bridge between past and present, a reminder that leadership, wisdom, and courage are not bound by gender or time. Even now, her temple at Deir el-Bahari stands as one of Egypt's architectural wonders. The rising sun still illuminates its terraces each morning, just as it did when she first conceived it. Tourists and pilgrims walk where her priests once sang. The air still smells faintly of desert dust and stone warmed by centuries of light. You stand there too, in imagination and in awe. You trace your hand along the carved reliefs, feeling the grooves worn smooth by wind and time. You see her image, half faded but eternal, a pharaoh offering gifts to Amun, her hands steady, her eyes serene. What she built endures because it was made not for conquest, but for balance. Every line of her temple mirrors the cliffs behind it. Every terrace ascends toward the heavens. It is a prayer in stone, a dialogue between earth and sky, human and divine. When you gaze up at her obelisks at Karnak, their tips still catching the sun, you realize that her dream has been fulfilled. She sought immortality not through war or blood, but through harmony with the eternal. And in that harmony, she found it. The name once erased is now spoken with reverence in every corner of the world. Scholars study her reign, travelers visit her monuments. Her story inspires countless hearts. Hatshepsut, the woman who became Pharaoh, has transcended time itself. You close your eyes and imagine her walking once more through her temple, the air warm with incense, the chants of Amun's priests echoing softly, her steps calm and sure. She turns toward the rising sun, the same sun that still glows over Thebes today, and smiles. Her life, her legacy, her memory, all have come full circle. And as the night deepens over the ancient cliffs, you feel her presence stretch across the ages, serene and unbroken. Eternal daughter of Amun, the legacy of Hatshepsut. Dawn breaks once more over Thebes. The air is cool and still, and the rising sun glides slowly across the Nile. Its light spills over the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari, bathing the ancient terraces in gold. The columns, the statues, the long ramps that ascend toward the heavens all glow softly as if the temple itself awakens to greet the day. You stand before it now, thousands of years after its creator has turned to dust. And yet everything about this place breathes her name. The woman who became Pharaoh, the daughter of Amun, the one who defied the order of kings and ruled Egypt in peace and beauty. Her story is no longer buried. Her name, once erased, now shines again in the world's memory. The silence of centuries has given way to voices, historians, archaeologists, storytellers, all repeating her tale, each word another chisel stroke restoring her to life. You imagine her spirit rising with the morning light, moving through the temple she built so carefully. Her footsteps echo softly through the colonnades over the carved reliefs that tell her life in stone, her divine birth, her coronation, her expedition to Punt, her offerings to Amun. These scenes, faded but unbroken, speak of harmony and creation. They speak of a ruler who believed that to build was to live forever. And so she does. Hatshepsut's reign, once dismissed as a historical curiosity, is now understood as one of Egypt's most prosperous eras. Modern scholars marvel at her administrative skill, her diplomatic wisdom, her artistic vision. She maintained peace not through conquest but through faith and order. Her temples stand among the most elegant structures of the ancient world. Her obelisks remain some of the tallest ever raised. Her influence reaches beyond Egypt, echoing across time to challenge what humanity once thought possible. She ruled when women were not meant to rule, commanded respect in a world of kings, and left behind monuments that speak not of war, but of creation. As the light climbs higher, you see her temple, as she must have seen it, ascending terraces leading toward the sky, blending earth and heaven in perfect proportion. Every line, every angle mirrors the cliffs behind it, a symbol of unity between humankind and the divine. Even in ruin, its beauty is breathtaking. It is not merely a tomb, it is a hymn in stone. Her spirit lives there still in the geometry of the walls and the rhythm of the desert wind. At Karnak, her obelisks rise tall among those of later kings. Their tips catch the sunlight gleaming as they once did when she first dedicated them to Amun. The hieroglyphs upon their sides still speak, carved deep enough to outlast the centuries. I did this with a heart full of love for my father Amun. I have made this monument for him, that my name may endure in his temple forever. And so it has endured. Hatshepsut's name now stands beside those of the greats Ramses, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun. But unlike theirs, her legacy is not written in conquest or rebellion. It is written in serenity. She ruled with restraint, yet her power was absolute. She built for the gods, yet her works continue to bless the living. You sense that her greatest triumph was not merely in seizing power, but in transcending it. She proved that authority could flow from wisdom, that strength could come from grace. Her reign reminds the world that peace, too, can be a monument. As you walk the temple's terraces, you feel the weight of her story settle gently upon you, the courage it took to stand against centuries of tradition, the vision it required to build a kingdom of faith and balance. Hers is not the tale of rebellion. It is the tale of alignment, of harmony with the eternal truth of Ma'at. You can almost hear her voice in the desert wind, calm and assured. I was fashioned by the god Amun, chosen to uphold his order. I did what was just, and my heart was pure. In this moment she seems close enough to touch, not as a queen of marble and myth, but as a human being who dared to follow the voice of the divine within her. Her afterlife has become her greatest reign. The rediscovery of her mummy, the restoration of her name, the admiration of generations, all are offerings placed at her feet by time itself. History, which once sought to erase her, now kneels before her memory. And when night returns to Thebes, the stars rise above her temple, just as they did in her lifetime. The same constellations, the same gentle wind, the same eternal rhythm of the Nile. The gods may have changed, but the peace she built remains. You gaze upon her monument one last time. The moonlight drapes its terraces in silver, the cliffs behind it glowing softly in the starlit silence. The world has changed beyond her imagining, yet here, among the stone and the sky, her spirit feels eternal. Perhaps that is her final lesson, that greatness is not the conquest of others, but the creation of something that endures beyond oneself. You close your eyes and hear her whisper again, faint, timeless, serene. I am Hatshepsut, daughter of Amun, who gave life to Egypt in peace. I built for the gods, and I live in the light of their eternity. And as the last echoes of her voice fade into the wind, the temple of Deir el-Bahari seems to glow softly beneath the stars, her soul made stone, her faith made immortal. The Nile flows on, carrying her memory from age to age. And you, listener, dreamer, traveller through time, breathe in the calm of her world, the peace she left behind, and drift gently into the eternal quiet of Egypt's night.